This is In the Zone with Ian Robb and Dancin Rodda. One's a mental toughness coach who also helps riders with recovery. The other, a horseman with soul, who is also a marriage counselor for the rider and horses. Together, they dive beyond ribbons and rankings to where real riders train, the mind. From elite arenas to quiet barns, this show is about the mental edge, the recovery rhythm, and the heart that keeps you in sync with your horse and yourself. So whether you're tuning in from the tack room or the open road, saddle up. You're in the zone now.
Welcome back to another episode of In the Zone with Ian Robb
and Dancin Rodda.
We will dive into the mindset, methods, and momentum behind equestrian greatness. And today's guest is a true force in our sport. He's a father to top riders, champion of equestrian athletes of all levels, and the president of the USEF, Tom O'Mara.
Thank you for having me. Good to see you guys.
Nice to have you, Tom. You are going beyond the boardroom today. We're navigating pressures in the saddle and leading a national federation. Tom brings insight, honesty, and yes, a little New York grit to the conversation. If you're a parent, a young rider, and a coach, or just someone who loves the sport, you're going to get something powerful out of this one. So tighten the girth and take a breath. We're going in the zone with Tom O'Mara. Woo-hoo.
All right.
Now we're ready. So, Tom, not everybody knows your history.
Yeah, I don't even know his history.
We met at an event there for Gentle Carousel, and my good friend here, Dancin Rodda, didn't even know your background a little bit.
Yeah.
So maybe you can help the field out here and understand a little bit about who is Tom O'Mara.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and that was a lot of fun at that charity event when they were raising some funds for a local charity here in Ocala, Gentle Carousel. They do great work with some miniatures, right? Going out and doing therapy with a lot of different people. And one of the things I didn't realize about them, I learned that night when the Sandy Hook shooting took place. The two founders of that organization were in Seattle, Washington. And they got a call, or they were flying home, or no, they got a call saying, we need help. We're going to need a lot of therapy up here. There's a lot of people who are going to need therapy for sure. They flew home to Ocala on the next flight they could get on, and they loaded their ponies, their therapeutic ponies and miniatures, on the truck and drove up to Connecticut as fast as they could. So they were there within 24 hours, coming from the Northwest down to the Southeast, and drove all the way up there. So they were the first ones on hand, and it's really remarkable. Great groups like that. You see them all over the country, but it was really nice to get a chance to meet Dancin Pete there and talk about a great organization. So, as always, I always forget the question because I start talking about other
Your
things.
Background. Who are you?
That's what people always ask. Who are you? That's the guy who talks all the time, is what they usually say.
That's usually what they say about me.
All right, there you go. But at least you could dance, Pete.
Okay.
So my background is I was born in New York City, and I am from New Jersey. And my wife and I, who I met in Chicago, she's a Midwesterner. I met her when I was going to graduate school out there. And we ended up having and raising 4 children in suburbs of New York and New Jersey. And my wife introduced them all to horses. And I've loved horses my whole life. I grew up in Colts Neck, New Jersey, and there was lots of horses around. It's a great racetrack out there, Monmouth Park. And it all just seemed kind of, natural. In my mother's family, going back, there's all sorts of equestrians. My grandfather, who I was named after, Tom Mason, he was a famous judge in the day. And in fact, my uncle Tom rode in Gladstone with the U.S. team, practiced with them. He was a member of the Essex Hounds, and he just recently passed away. And one of my cousins sent me these 2 tumblers, not tumblers, but sterling silver cups that apparently were my grandfather's that my uncle had. And they were for judging at a horse show out in Chicago, 1959. So it was nice they sent that. So I guess on both sides of my family, there's been horses and equestrians of all different types, but not directly my parents. But I think I loved it. I think it was in our DNA, both myself and my wife. She loved horses growing up out in Chicago, and her father wouldn't let her ride very much. She rode a little bit. But when we had our kids, my wife wanted to introduce them to horses. So I made sure they did all sports and as well as horses, and I always figured, you can't figure it out. You got to try them all and make a selection of what really fits your heart. And we have 3 daughters and a son, and one after the other, they all found their way onto the back of a pony or a horse. locally. So that was a lot of fun. So I am not a horse professional. My background is I worked on Wall Street for 30 plus years in the capital markets area, which is generally trading. And I came up in the equity derivatives world, and I ended up trading pretty much anything in the United States. And then I ended up managing trading desks across the world, working for a very large global investment bank, two of them over the years, and then a smaller one after that. So I loved doing it. It was very competitive. You never knew what was going to happen every day you walked in. The markets changed. We had a lot of risk. People used to come up to my wife and say, how does he handle the risk? Do people freak out? And she said, he sleeps like a baby. So somehow I was built to be able to handle that. I could turn that off, sleep, and get back into the saddle the very next morning. But it was all, it was a lot of fun. I loved doing it because exactly what I said earlier, you got to learn something new every day. So that being said, that world was changing. Trading was getting automated. Not a lot of the stuff we did was a lot of big institutional block trading and long dated derivatives and whatnot. But nevertheless, it was changing. I started consulting for trading the new electronic trading systems out there because they needed an old guy to tell them what they were trying to turn old guy talk into through electronics. And I helped a lot of small startup electronic trading companies start up and then introduce them to the old world. So I think you could hear a little bit, though, one of my skills, people always ask me, you don't know how many people over the years when I worked there, including my family and friends, they would call and say, give me a good stock. How do I make money? And I used to say, I'm not an investment advisor, although I did a lot of that. I did run a hedge fund for a while, successfully, unwound it right as the market crashed in 2008. Fortuitous. I'd like to say I chose to do that, but it happened, and I did it the right way and quickly. But everyone always asks me, how do we make money on it? And I said, no, I trade for a living. I don't invest for a living, although I have all the qualifications, I guess, to be an institutional investor as well. But what was important in that was that I could translate and speak to people across all the different types of asset classes and between investors and markets and traders anywhere around the world. So when they always said, I interview young people who wanted to come into work in a trading business or an investment banking business, and they always said, how'd you get to do what you do? And I said, just listen to everyone and understand what's going on out there, because what's really hot today, what product's hot today won't be hot by the time in 10 years. So the world's always changing, just be ready for change. And they said, well, what'd you study? What'd you read? I said, read everything. And I can't tell you what I studied, but I can tell you, listening to everyone was more important than, telling everyone what to do, because you have to be able to listen to them so you can hear. And that's how I started to be able to translate between different departments, because someone was interested in one style of trading or one style of investing, and they didn't understand the other ones. And I can see, and that was my edge. I can walk in and say, have you ever thought of this? And that was an interesting part of it, which I will stop talking in a second, but I find that to be very much the case in the horse world. There's lots of different products, i.e. there's lots of different breeds, there's lots of different disciplines, there's lots of way to train, there's lots of different types of way to ride. You can ride recreationally, you could trail ride, you could try to compete and become very competitive and get to what people might call the top of the game in the Olympics. But you know what? For others, the top of the game is going to be going on a great trail ride once a week. And that's very important. So there's lots of different angles. And, if many equestrians are in one silo or one bucket or one style or one breed or discipline, we got to be open to all of them, because at the end of the day, what ties us all together in equestrian sport is the horse, right? The horse is the same. The horses don't know. I've gone over to OBS nearby here.
Yes.
And I go over to watch the sales, right? Ocala breeder sales. For your listeners who don't know what OBS is, but it's kind of neat. I go over there and I feel like I'm out of an old Humphrey Bogart movie or something. I put a newspaper under my arm and I get a cup of coffee and put on an old fedora. I sit on my hands, and everyone's got the little timers out. They still use those, right? There's some guys with computers, and I just kind of think it's really cool, right? It's a whole industry that's going on out there. And I watch, and I remember they're walking the horses in to put up on the stage, and the auctions are going on, right? These young horses being auctioned off. They have yearling sales and 2-year-olds and whatnot. And I remember there was two horses waiting at the door to go in, and there's a long line of them. The grooms have them there, and they're beautiful, beautiful thoroughbreds, these young thoroughbreds standing there. And I remember thinking to myself, the two thoroughbreds, I saw them looking at each other, and they started nickering, and I'm like, those two guys don't even know what's going on, really, quite frankly. They don't know that there's a bunch of humans. They know there's a bunch of humans standing around, but they're about to put a price on them as a 1 or 2 year old animal. And they go walking in the door, and the one goes for, X amount of money and comes walking out, and the other one goes for 5X that amount of money and comes walking out. And I said, they're just horses. They don't know the difference in value, the difference in use. And to them, the handlers treated them the same, quite frankly. Why wouldn't they? They need everything. So it's kind of neat. That's why I like living in Macau.
And stock market, that's why they call it the stock market, because it used to be stock.
Well,
and they
right.
still trade stock.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting because I do like how you used your previous life in New York in training, and how you now correlate it with all the different events that we have in the equestrian world.
That's right.
And being able to really put them all together and talk their languages for different things, because they all have different languages.
Right. Well, that's an important part of it. And listen, when I sit down with horse professionals in the various breeds, disciplines, organizations that are affiliates that are part of the USEF, organizations that are not part of the USEF, right? There's plenty. Horse racing, the whole Western world, the whole polo world, but we're all united. And I do sit on the American Horse Council, which kind of brings together all those pieces together. And we have great conversations with each other. But it's really important to sit down and recognize that people are just coming from a different perspective, but there's a common bind amongst them all. And I didn't realize that when I first got involved with horse governance, I was put on the board of the USEF. Put on it. I was nominated, and there was a lot of people nominated, and there's a review and there's a vote on it by the board. But I was put on as an independent director. And there were 2 out of the 21 are independent. That's in the bylaws, and that's kind of structural, the way that works, just to get some, thoughts from some people who are maybe peripherally involved with the horse world, but bring other skills. So my skill set that they saw, I think that stood out, was my finance background. Because, the governing body, not just for equestrian sport, but for all sports, is growing, and there's a big business side to it. And it may not be what all horse professionals want to sit down and spend their time dealing on, although many do. And I get that. But someone has to be, focused on that from a kind of strategic and a financial. And I will tell you, sitting in my position, I represent the US Federation, which is the national federation, internationally. So I go to the FEI, which is the International Federation. I go to their General Assembly, and I sit there. It's kind of neat. I have the senior staff has already teed up all the questions and all the concerns that will be discussed, debated, and voted on there. And I just hit the button and cast the vote for the US. But I get to mingle with national federation heads from around the world. And I have to tell you, it's not because of me. It's because we have a great federation. We have a great sport in this country. And I know there's plenty of people come up to me in my role. It's been 5 years now I've been president. I'm in my 2nd term. But many people come up to me and say, oh, they do it really well overseas. They do it really well. And they do in many ways. There's different parts of it. But I feel like I get a really good picture of it because I get to sit with, from the top down, other federations. And quite frankly, a lot of them have a lot of issues. The biggest one that stands out to me all the time is financial. Now I'll come back to the United States. So I get to look at other equestrian sport organizations across the world. So I get to compare us to them. And then within our country, we're part of the United, it's an Olympic sport. So our federation is represented at the USOPC, the United States Olympic Paralympic Committee. And so we get to look at all the other sports in the United States with governing bodies, of which there's 54 of them, around that number. And that's really interesting too, because we interact with them. Now, I do less so sitting at the USOPC. Our senior staff, our CEO and our general counsel do, and our sports people, of course, our high performance sports people. But we do really well versus all the other, on a lot of different metrics, however you want to measure it. Sometimes we do poorly, but in the aggregate, we are highly regarded versus all the other sports governing bodies. Now, again, I walk around horse shows and I don't hear that all day long from every single person I meet. And I try to listen to them. I do. I listen to everyone. It's my job. Not everyone has all the information that I am privy to. And so that's shame on us. We try to get as much information out there as we can, but we need to make decisions also. You can't have 100 people every time there's a decision to be made come in the room and get caught up on all the facts. And in the aggregate, I think we make very good decisions and are moving things forward. But what I can tell you, in both those positions, you probably heard me say, like, I'm the figurehead who pushes the button for the vote or whatever. And I did this on Wall Street. Like, we had PhDs from MIT, you name it, sitting on my trading desk working for me. These guys were, and women were smarter than me, no doubt, in certain ways. But I could understand what they did, and I could explain what they did to a person who wasn't a PhD from MIT. So it kind of helps that I surrounded myself to make decisions with billions of dollars on the line around the world, moving very rapidly. I had 200 plus traders around the world in every market, trading every asset class 24/7, and they were all moving, and it was just like this wild thing moving around. It was like sitting on a live type of anaconda or something like that. But what I did do is make sure I had really smart people around me. So I had finance professionals and experts in every field come around, whether it was in the technology, the legal side, the whatever it was. And that's what I try to do in my role at the USEF. Again, I'm not a horse professional. I can't sit in a room with people who've been training horses their whole lives. But I know when there's a question about that.
I don't know. I want you to be in the room with them. You might add a lot more to it.
But I know when we have those questions, believe me, those types of questions are not being made by me.
So you got me in the zone by listening to all this. So the first thing I want to say is, what's above genius?
What's that?
The simple man.
Yeah.
A genius can only teach another genius. A simple man can teach the world.
I like that.
And that's what it sounds like you.
Yeah.
And you sound like you're the connector.
Yeah.
To the horse world.
Yeah,
where you're
I hope so. That's my goal.
To it, but no, I love what you just said because
rambled on about. Well, it's simple. It's like the simple. It's like you really want to make an impact on a person's life. You could take, what is it, that the fishing thing?
Teach a man to fish, or give a man a fish, feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime.
Yeah. It's a little bit along those lines, I think. Yeah. But anyway, so I'm sure there's some other interesting things you guys want to talk about. Not me.
Well, there is quite a bit right here, and I think I had about 50 questions, but we're not going to get all there.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious, what's a lesson that you learned? And when I ask this question, I want you to talk about your kids and what they're doing right now and all that stuff. Give them the kudos that they have.
Yeah.
But what's a lesson for your time as a parent of a top equestrian athlete that you still carry into your leadership role today?
Well, I think that's interesting. I was listening to one of your other podcasts when you had Hope and Avery Glynn on.
Yes.
And I remember one of the very important things, and I heard Hope say towards the end of that was, I think you asked her, what do you want to be? Well, what's important in your career or something like
your legacy for your name of Glynn.
And she said, it's not the last blue ribbon. It's that everyone I've done business, everyone I've engaged with at the ring, something along the paraphrasing it, remembers me for being a good person. And I thought that was great when I heard her say that, because that's the biggest thing I took away from it was like, that's really important.
You can take that too if you want. It's not patent.
But so to your point is, what's a great message from it? And my kids will laugh because they know I said this to them so many times. Like, if you're not having fun, let's stop doing it. Mm-hmm. At any point in time. Like, they were juniors, they were young kids, and we introduced them to this. And, we were fortunate we were able to do it the way we did. All 4 kids rode at one time. And someone once told me there's good news and bad news. My whole family was together because I went to a lot of horse shows where, oftentimes the boys weren't necessarily riding. They'd be off doing baseball or basketball, and maybe the dad went off with the boys and the girls were riding, and maybe the mom was there. So we saw like halves of a lot of families. The good news, bad news is the good news is my whole family did it, and we all did it together. So that's a big benefit that we had. The bad news is my whole family did it, and we all did it together. So, someone else coined that one too. They're like, Tom, it's good and bad.
So how does your kids think about you being in the position you're in?
So that's a great question, because when I was asked to be on the board, to me, that was simple. I didn't really, I told them all I was going to do that kind of, because I was an independent director and, but when the board, I was nominated to be the president, and again, board votes on that. But before they nominated me, I was on the board and they said a number of people had approached me. I guess I was nominated by quite a number of people anyway. And I said to them, well, I got to check this with my family because, as I said earlier, not everyone, eyes wide open. Not everyone is always in agreement with what the USEF does. Not everyone is always in agreement with what the president of the USEF does. And, everyone has access to at the end of their fingertips, these machines now, which they can say anything they want at any point in time. And that's just the way the world is. So to me, as a father of 4 kids, I didn't want my family to ever be impacted by this. So I did ask them all, and my daughters were wonderful and were like, Dad, we'll get off social media. Like I haven't typed anything on social media, I don't think, in 5 years, 6 years. But my kids also said, my one daughter said they'd be lucky to have you. And I'm like, she likes me a lot, obviously. And the other daughters are like, no, don't worry about it. But my son, the youngest one, actually, he was the first one. He said to me, why do you want to do it? He said, that's great, Dad, but why do you want to do it? And I said, it's great. I said, so here's another lesson from your old dad, who you think has one foot in the grave, to my young son at the time. He's still young, but he was like 21 then. And I said, and the message is, no matter how old you are, every day you wake up, you have to be willing to learn something new. And it doesn't happen every day, but you have to be willing to try to do that. And that's what was exciting to me about it, because I'm not a horse professional and I didn't specialize in any one thing. My family was involved. We owned plenty of horses. We owned a horse training facility. It was 20 years, traveling around to horse shows. So I was a horse show dad. And I had a lot of downtime at horse shows. So I analyzed a lot of things and I saw a lot of things that I thought could be done better. And I've been a member of all the organizations. I used to go and listen to their annual meetings and just to hear what was going on. My kids were very into the sport. To me, I got to figure all that out. But to me, that was a very important message, just make sure you're learning something new every day. And I think with horses, it's easy because, and if you're in the horse community, in the horse world, there's so many people from so many walks of life and so many horses from different, that are all totally different. So similar to when I said it was exciting, I would go in and trade every day because every day bought something new. Honestly, when you wake up and you're sitting in my position, there's something new every day. And it's normally not what I expect.
I'm just curious. You've helped shape the USEF through many times of massive change. What's the hardest decision, Tom, you've had to make as a president, besides having me at an event?
Yes.
Yeah, that would be a tough one.
Well, again, my role as president, I'm technically also chairman of the board. The board sets a strategic plan, and we work with outside people. We do a lot of internal research and soul searching and analyzing everything that we've been doing. What do we do well? What don't we do well? What should we be doing? What is there that we don't even know we're not doing? So my job is to make sure that the strategic plan is being affected by the staff, and the CEO sits on top of that. So I don't run the day-to-day operations internally at the Federation, but it's a full-time job what I do, because if I'm not out shaking hands and kissing babies in the field, my role is to ensure and connect with the CEO, because he does report to me. So that's the only report in that building of 130 people to me, but to make sure that we're actually affecting the strategic plan. So one of the toughest decisions during that period of time, well, listen, there's been 2 extreme events that have occurred since I've been president of the Federation. And I always call these things exogenous events. And by the way, this happened in the capital markets. Like, you don't know when there's going to be if you do know, you'd be super
making
wealthy.
a lot of money.
but exogenous events kind of creep, and all of a sudden there's a crash in any asset class. So we'd always have to respond to those, and you had to respond fast. And to me, it was always about understanding the downside and minimizing the downside risks so that we're not all knocked out of business. And I've said this line a million times in my life. In fact, my wife has finally written it down, and she has it in a little book of notes, because I said, and she said to me, "You say this so much, I'm putting it on your gravestone. That's your epitaph." And the quote is, and maybe I picked this up from someone, but I say it all the time. I'm sure I read it, but it's kind of a mosaic theory, so I can't take credit for it either. But my motto is, take care of the downside and the upside takes care of itself. And because that's the only thing. And, you know, finally, when I'm an old guy, and I say this to younger people now, they roll their eyes and whatnot, but it does work out in the long run. And you just got to make sure that you survive the short-term blips. So the exogenous events that happened in the equestrian space were COVID, which crushed everybody in every industry around the world. And we had a big EHV outbreak, which was one of the biggest ones that we've faced in horse sport the following year or 2 years later, primarily in California, but it was pretty much everywhere. So those things shut down the sport. In fact, I used one of the terms that I used to use in my career at a bank. I sat down with our CEO, our CFO, and I said, we have to analyze the downside really fast here, really fast. If everything comes to a stop, we have to ensure that the national governing body is still in place after all this happens, because at that time, remember, no one knew how long this was going to last, how bad it was going to be. I mean, there's many more important questions than what we're doing in our sport with our horses. Now, of course, the horses are living and breathing animals also, so we still have to take care of them, of course. But if everything comes to a halt, who knows how long it would. What would we do and can we survive? So we made a lot of drastic actions. And the term I used to use for that was scorched earth. Mm-hmm. So I would always run a scorched earth P&L, a spreadsheet. Okay, you know, when markets were crashing, and I'd walk in my boss, he's like, how much money did you lose today? And I'd say, forget about how much I lost today. How much money are we going to lose next week or next month? Because of all this capital that our bank has on the line that's moving around like a wild man. You know, so that's the number I would walk in with, and they never wanted to hear from me because it was an ugly scenario. The good news is we never hit those horrible things that I used to bring out, but I wanted to prepare them for what the downside could possibly be. But if you don't prepare for that, then you're not ready. And as long as we can stomach that, then the upside takes care of itself. One of the greatest things I think we did as a federation in my term, and this is lost on a lot of people. People remember when it was happening, but I think this is really unique. We were the first sport to reopen during COVID for competition. Golf, they reopened some golf courses, not all, depends on what state you're in. Certain states and jurisdictions had stricter rules. Because it was outdoors, they let the courses open, but they didn't have competition. Now, you may remember we reopened literally, I think it was the beginning of July when we closed in March. Shut down all horse shows, right? Everything. And by the way, the other horse entities in the country did the same thing, but they didn't reopen like we did. But of other sports, we reopened. And I know that because we sat with all the other sports when we meet at USOPC, you know, meetings. And that was remarkable. And we as a federation really did lead that charge. We went, it wasn't me, but our senior staff, our CEO, and they went state to state and talked to, in the biggest states that we had horse shows. And we sat down with the offices of the Secretary of State, and we talked about outdoor activities. And in a number of those states, they actually used, and we came up with protocols. CDC, WHO, boom, 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 pulled them all together, said if we wore masks and distance and took temperatures. And believe me, we got holy you-know-what from a lot of exhibitors. Why are you doing this? Just let us show. Well, the law wasn't going to let us show unless we came up with protocols. So we had to take it in the chin from quite a few people who were barking about it constantly. But at the end of the day, and by the way, many people, members of the Federation, were upset with us that we even reopened.
Right.
They're like, you're putting people's lives in danger. I got a phone call. I pick up the phone. Are you looking at the caskets on TV? And I'm like, oh my God, it's not what I signed up for. Yes, I am. It's horrible. We're just trying to manage and give people options if you so choose to do it. No one's being forced to do anything. That's what I have to walk people back. But that was really a lot of work. And some of those states used those protocols that we set up for horse shows and started applying them to other outdoor sporting events.
Oh, correct. So I actually remember, because I lived in San Diego, and I remember thermal and all this other good stuff. So I remember, California, very familiar with those horse events opening up. And it was even tough being involved in the horse world, even going to the barns and stables. They wouldn't even allow us. And I know at, Santa Anita, they had their own little village. No one left that place. We couldn't get in, get out. But you guys kind of opened that up. Now, on the flip side, in Orange County, I went to a professional pickleball tournament, and there's like 7,500 people all shoulder to shoulder jammed up. And, there was no protocols going on there. But that's a whole
no regulation for them, which is fine.
Totally fine.
Yeah.
But
yeah, Michigan, Kentucky, New Jersey, New York, Florida, Texas.
And I would say, how many lives did you save for these kids that had an outlet?
I don't know. I wouldn't put a number on that, but listen, we just wanted to create options for people who everyone chooses to do what they wanted to do at that period of time. And we, wanted to make sure there was and by the way, Europe never reopened. In fact, interesting. Fast forward, I went to the Tokyo Olympic Games, which were supposed to be in 20, but got postponed to 21. And I remember, and no spectators were allowed there. And I sat up in the stands. I was a member of the U.S. constituency. I didn't want to go near any of our athletes. By the way, the Japanese did a phenomenal job. I mean, they took a bath on that whole thing. I'm sure financially,
they did,
but they did everything correct on a global basis. We couldn't leave the hotel. We couldn't do anything. You couldn't even walk out and get in a cab unless it was, and we were tested every day, the whole 9 days. So who knows? Because if any athlete got tested positive, they were put into a separate hotel and couldn't compete. So I'm like, I don't want to be the person who infects one of our athletes. So I didn't want to be near anyone. So I sat up in the stands by myself. Actually, there was a woman who was one of the owners came up and she sat there, and we went through. We were watching. There was 75 show jumpers in the Olympic Games, and we watched them all. And I had, old-fashioned way. I had a printout of them all, and I'm writing down notes. And we were distanced and wearing masks. The closest person to me, and I was asking her some questions. And we wrote down where every one of those people, and remember, of the 75, only 4 were Americans, right? So we're watching them all, and I'm writing down next to their names. Since Europe was closed and most of the rest of the world was closed for the year leading up to those Olympic Games. Now it was in the summer 21, so some things had reopened, but they had all gotten themselves, the top riders in the world got themselves to the United States the previous fall, and they all trained. So it was like 65% of the riders in the show jumping at the Olympics in Tokyo spent the previous year, a large part of the previous year, training in the United States. So us being able to open not just helped, equestrians in the United States, it helped equestrians around the world.
And you have such a unique position and experience because you've been the president when it was at Tokyo.
Yeah.
Also in Paris.
Correct.
And now we're coming up to the United States in Los Angeles. What does that mean for you?
It's kind of neat. Yeah, I'll get 3 Olympic Games under my belt. The first one was supposed to be my predecessor's, but when it got postponed, it fell into my term. So unfortunate for him, but good for me. I'd never gone to an Olympic Games in my life. Watched them, but it's really unique. When I go, I focus on the job at hand. I'm not there really as a spectator for anything else. I've had the opportunity to see a thing or two, but not much, because it's important for to make sure when our athletes and our team and the people behind the scenes, which you all know, there's so many of them. That were there, and I'm just kind of the ambassador standing there, making sure the other countries, having conversations with the leaderships of the other countries as well. But yeah, it was really exciting to be able to see that, and to have the final one be here in the United States is huge.
It is really huge.
It's really huge.
I mean, that's a cherry on top of the ice cream.
Well, we've been working. The federation has been working on the LA 28. I remember when I walked in the door, my first meeting as president, I heard them saying, okay, we have a meeting. We're talking LA 28. I'm like, well, I'm not going to be here then, so I don't need to sit on the meeting. They said, oh yeah, you're going to be here then. I don't know what they knew at the time, but it goes on for years ahead of time, right? Even when it's not in our country. The planning that goes into these things is really remarkable. And the staff and team that does it is just, listen, I used to think it was cool sitting in the middle of a room watching different trades going on and the excitement of that type of stuff. But sitting in a room watching these games get pulled together and our athletes get the opportunities to compete at so many different places And again, it's not just at the high end of our sport. I get, believe it or not, given that I was a horse show dad and my kids all rode, and I've been to, I think I missed last year's during Paris. I think I missed pony finals last year. But I've been at it probably I've been at it more times when my kids rode in it, I guess. But to be there and watch the parents, to be there now, not as a parent, but to be there, we invite them down to the headquarters. Pony jumpers, we had this year, which grew huge. It's 140 some odd pony jumpers this year, up from 20 the year before. They changed the formats. Took years to get that done. A lot of great work by pony committees, jumping committees, USHJ. Everyone was involved with getting that to happen. We had a jumping riders meeting outside of our headquarters. There was 140 of them with their parents and their grandparents. One of the coolest things I've ever seen. I said, I let them all know how hard everyone inside the building behind me worked on trying to get this done. These kids and their parents, they all stood up and were cheering. It was wonderful to see. And again, has nothing to do with me, but that building and the effort that goes on by the Federation. There's days that it's lost, but a day like that, I just looked and I was like, wow, that's really a great feeling. So it's from ponies to the Olympics.
There you go. The question I want to ask you is, what does in the zone mean to you?
Mm-hmm.
And then my second question after that is, when do you live outside the zone? Because it seems to me that you are always in the zone, and that's what gives you the special superpower of connecting people.
That's nice. So that's nice of you to say that. I don't know if that's true, but so I always have thought, there's a couple of things. People always talk about what are the 3 T's for success: time, treasury, and talent, right? And for all sports. And that applies in equestrian. I always heard that as a horse show dad. I'm like, okay, it's time in the saddle and it's a long game. And you just got to remember that every day. And remind me, there's one important thing I want to say about that. But since then, I realized it's not just effort, right? Because effort's important if you want to succeed, no matter what you do. So not just in equestrian sport, but in industry and other sports in life, you got to put in the effort. And then when things happen, they mean a lot more. But there's 2 parts of effort. There's effort and then there is talent, because I know, Pete, you're a great dancer. Like, I could go out and practice dancing, 40 hours a week. I could put in the effort, but I am never going to be able to dance well, ever. However, it doesn't mean I should not do it. If I enjoy it, there's always a level for everybody to do whatever it is that they enjoy. So that's really important. So to me, that's the third part. So it's effort, talent. I'm changing the 3 T's to my own thing. It's you got to put the work in, and then that develops talent. But people's develop talent, some part of that's inherent, so it grows differently. It just does. But the third part, which gives you, even if you're not matched talent for talent, the third part is mindset. Because to me, and I again listen to lots of top athletes in our sport and outside of our sport. That's what can even the playing field positively, as long as you put in the effort. If you don't think you've developed the talent, or you don't have the treasury or the time, the mindset, as long as you're happy with where you are at that point in time, you will continue to advance and succeed. And that's a hard thing for a lot of people, right?
I think that's a great point. I do that with a lot of my students, lower level students that go, I'm not good enough. I'm not. And I said, you are where you are. Be happy where you are, because that's how you advance. And what you're saying, the mindset, if you have that mindset, things will start happening.
Well, think about our sport versus all other sports. We now have horse shows that you can go to, we all go to, and they have lead line to the highest level show jumping equivalent of international show jumping. So you can have a 5-year-old being introduced to the sport for the first time, or younger, some of them, and you could have a 5-time Olympian at the same sporting event competing, which is great, because I can walk over, or I could go to all the different rings and see all different levels of riding, capability-wise. And it's what's great for our younger riders, get to see that when they go to those type of places. So that's the good part of it. The bad part about it is, if you don't have the right mindset, that could be a detriment to you too. Because believe me, I stood next to my own young children and others who were standing around, and I can see they all see how our top riders do things, and they want to do it today. So the good news is, over the years, I've made acquaintances or some friendships with many of the top athletes in all the different disciplines, and I hear their story. And, I remember, I think BZ Madden won her first FEI Grand Prix when she was 32 years old. You know, I might be off on one of those numbers, but directionally, that's correct. I repeat that to every junior rider in the world. I'm like, okay, y'all know who BZ is. Yeah, the greatest, ranked #1 in the world at one time, the greatest American show jumper for many years, and one of the best female athletes in the world. And I'm like, yeah, and guess what? She's done it her whole life, and she had the mindset to go at the work, develop the talent, but she had the mindset to accept where she was at all points in time and just keep moving forward. And by the way, your partner's the horse, so you got to work with them too. So I think that's really the important part to it, Pete.
So
So when do you are not in the zone? When you sleep, or do you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and come up with?
I don't. I sleep. I still sleep pretty solidly through
Okay.
the day. Yeah. So I think that I must turn off at that point.
Okay.
that's good. That's good. So Tom, since we're talking about mindset and all that stuff,
Uh-huh.
what do you think is the biggest mindset challenges facing young equestrian athletes today?
Well, I think a little bit of what I just said is, wanting too much too soon. And however, we have great young riders who are super successful really fast. So it's just a different pace. I think that's the biggest challenge. It's just a different pace. And there's many times in your life when you're young, especially that won't look like things are equal or fair, and there's different resources someone else has. Stick with it. If you love it. I said to more than one of my kids, my wife and I said, when you turn 21, we're not supporting you anymore. And if you want to be a professional, you've got to do it on your own. And that's how they've done it. And I said, you may not see a ring, no less a Grand Prix ring, if you think you're going to be a Grand Prix show jumper, for the next 10 years. And if you can't accept that, stop doing this now.
So Tom, what advice would you give the parents of young equestrians about the pressures of performance? How can they help their kids stay in the zone and not in their head?
Well, I don't like to give other parents advice on what to do, but I think they all know what's best for their own kid. And you got to keep all I can say is what I did was just make sure I recognized that I was keeping them level-headed. If I saw them getting over their skis or getting super around, listen, you have to be competitive when you walk in, whether you're at a pony championship, a hunter championship, or a jumper championship. But it's a little bit like what I said, Hope Glynn said. Then no one's going to remember that last blue ribbon, no matter how big the class is. You're going to ride again the next year. 2 quick adds to that. I remember a junior rider who was winning everything when one of my daughters was 16 or 17, and I spoke to her. And I remember her grandmother would show up at some of the big competitions. And I said, so your grandmother, I saw her and I said, your grandmother must have been really happy. You won this major championship. And she said, no, my grandmother always tells me you're only as good as your last blue ribbon. So get back at it. And I said, well, that's why that girl kept winning, because she didn't care about that. And she didn't live, she didn't rest on her laurels. She'd get back in there and do what she did, the week before. So I think that's an important part.
All right, we're going to have some fun now. We're going to flip the switch. We're going to be in the zone lightning round with Tom O'Mara.
I can't think this quick.
This is rapid fire, 1 or 2 sentence answers only. Are you ready, Tom?
Favorite breed of horse and why?
The Morgan, because I wanted a Morgan horse when I was a kid, and a Connemara pony.
There you go. Okay, hunter, jumper, dressage, or polo. Which would you secretly compete in?
Oh boy, probably like an in-hand hunter class, so I don't have to get on the back of the horse.
Helmet or hat? What's your go-to in the barn?
Oh,
Look.
well, I wear a hat.
First horse you ever loved, name or personality? Could be one of your kids or your wife's.
Yeah, it was probably one of the racehorses though that I just thought was phenomenal. Was what was the Gray Ghost back in the day? And it was back in the 50s. I wasn't alive, but I remember reading stories about him, and so many thoroughbreds are descended from. Okay, Secretariat.
Secretariat. Okay.
More nervous watching your kids in a jump off or giving a speech at nationals?
Oh, watching my kids in a jump off.
Most used app on your phone, and be honest.
Most used app. Yeah, I guess I got to do this fast. That would be used app. Open Table.
Open Table. That's pretty good. I like that. I like that.
No, it's Instagram.
Instagram. Okay.
If you could switch jobs with anyone at USEF for a day, who would it be?
The call center.
Okay.
Even though they get yelled at sometimes, but they get to solve short-term problems for a lot of people.
There you go. Their first ambassador, first impression. Here we go. Biggest horse show, guilty pleasure, Tom. Snacks, merch, or something else?
Yeah, it's going to be snacks. They get in trouble if it's a place that's got, some of them have some phenomenal food.
Yes.
Yeah, that gets me in trouble.
This one I like. One word your staff would use to describe you. I know what I would tell. I'd say Mr. Personality.
Okay. I'll tell you, when I worked on a trading floor, everyone had nicknames.
Okay.
And finally one day, and I used to help give people nicknames. And I looked around one day at a morning meeting and I said, wait a second, what's my nickname? I don't have a nickname. And one of the young guys looked at me and goes, you have a nickname, we just don't tell you.
All right. Song that gets you in the zone before a big moment.
Yeah, I think my wife can. It does. Because she pulls me in. She just says, obviously I speak a lot. I've had to give talks. She's had to sit through them.
Hear the same story over and over again.
So I've gotten up to give a speech now, and she sends me up there, not with an egg timer, but with a cooking timer. And just to make sure I'm done in 2 minutes.
But I didn't know, is there a song that comes in before you want to go? Like what would be your intro song if you're a baseball player or something of that nature?
Eye of the Tiger.
No. Oh, there is a song that I play all the time. I can't remember who even sings it. It's
I've seen a few bars.
kind of a rap song from a while ago.
Eminem.
No. But I like, people know I like kind of mellow jam music. I like the Allman Brothers, Grateful Dead, or Fish.
There you go.
Do you have a lucky item or ritual before a big event?
Well, yeah, I pray.
Best advice you've ever received, Tom, in or out of the ring?
Best advice.
Best advice.
Yeah, it's probably from my dad. It's similar to, focus on the downside and the upside takes care of itself. I said once, I think I was having a difficult time getting through something financially once. And my dad's like, well, you just don't need to do it. I was like, yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Finish this sentence. Being in the zone feels like.
When you're in the zone, it feels satisfying.
This is the last one. Dream guest, living or dead, to have on this podcast with you. Who would you
Dream
want?
guest. I'm kind of a history buff, so there's a lot of anyone from primarily American history I'd love to meet. I'd like to meet some of my ancestors from 400 years ago.
There you go. Probably tell them they owe you $20.
I would say this is the most raw in the zone
You know what?
we've ever done.
We gotta love it. Thanks, Tom. We appreciate you coming on and joining us.
Yeah.
And being part of the team.
Yeah, it's neat. I like what you guys are doing.
Yeah, so we had a lot of fun. So, all right. Well, what a ride. Huge thanks to Tom O'Mara for joining us and sharing his wisdom from both sides of the arena, as a parent, as a rider advocate, and as visionary leader for our sport. If today's episode lit a fire and gave you a fresh perspective, share it with someone in your barn, your equestrian circle, and don't forget, the winning ride starts in the mind. We'll see you next time right here in the zone.
That's a wrap on another powerful episode of In the Zone with Ian Robb and Dancin Pete Rodda. Whether you ride, compete, or simply love your animals like family, today's episode was a reminder that true teamwork starts with connection and that health is the ultimate performance edge. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. And catch us next time as we dive deeper into the mind, body, and bold journeys of top performers. Until then, stay focused, stay inspired, and keep riding in the zone.